Hey everyone, welcome to this podcast called Ken Reads, where I can read out your letter that you've shared with me in the hopes that I can better help you understand what the F just happened between you and the last partner you were dating, whether it was in a relationship or a situationship. I look at these experiences from the lens of attachment theory. I don't just come up with thought terminating cliches like, they're just not that into you, or if they wanted to, they would. While some of those phrases might have their benefit in other dynamics, I try and look at this from the lens of, is there perhaps an insecure attachment issue that's at play in these particular dynamics? And though I am an Australian counsellor, I am not someone who is going to be responding to these letters as if I was with a client. I'm here to provide validation, yes, but I can't provide any diagnoses on these. So even if, a lot of people might understandably hear this and be like, well, that sounds like a narcissist. At best, I'll probably say, sounds a bit narky. I probably won't go any further than that out of respect to my ethical boundaries in regards to what I can and can't do. If you find this of benefit to you, fantastic. That's what I want. And if you want to submit your letter, you're very welcome to, once there is obviously availability per month. And I'll happily read out and share my own 2 cents as to what I think has gone on in your dating experience to offer you a sense of validation for what you've been through, and also to give other people listening a chance to feel like maybe this relates to what they've also experienced as part of collective healing. So with that all out of the way, let's dive in to the latest letter. Our next letter comes from Matilda. Matilda writes her title of this letter as, "We were together for 4.5 years and he ghosted me at Christmas right as he was going to move in." That sounds like trauma and tragedy right there. So I'm keen to get into this, but I just want to start off with a bit of validation to say that's pretty fucked. Like that's really fucked. So already the we know the plot twist, I suppose, but I think for those of you who are regular listeners, you know how this story goes. Let's get into it. Matilda writes, "Dear Ken, I was in a relationship for 4.5 years with someone I thought I was going to spend my life with. His name is Brian, and right before Christmas, just as we were going to move in together, he ghosted me. Everything I thought we were building together was gone in an instant. When we first met during COVID, everything seemed perfect. We'd spent hours talking about our pasts, hopes, and dreams. It felt like we were building something real. The chemistry was insane. But one thing stood out for me. Bruce would get uncomfortable when I gave him compliments. I felt like he deserved to feel appreciated, but he never told me he got compliments growing up. I wanted to be there for him, to show him that he was worthy of love and kindness, and it made me sad hearing he never got that support. Yeah, a lifetime of not receiving compliments can have a big impact on someone's development. You know, it's one of those things where you made a really good point, Matilda, that for some of these individuals, they like the validation of being needed, but it can feel really uncomfortable for them to be actually told, no, you're doing an amazing job. You're a really good person. Because it can make them feel like that contrasts with the negative voice in their head that's telling them, you're a piece of shit. The shame that a lot of these individuals feel often runs the show. And so, even though for a lot of us who have had a degree of, let's just say, affection, affirmation, and being told, yeah, you're doing a good job, we generally like feedback and compliments. But for people like this who've maybe learned to have a diet of inefficient love, not really being given a lot of praise for things that they've done well, they may learn to equate love as being of service rather than necessarily learning to take, healthy feedback and also being told, no, I think you're doing great. So I can understand why it makes you feel sad. And at the same time, something tells me that's part of a larger, let's just say, it's part of the larger iceberg. What seems like a small thing, as I've said recently, it may seem like 5% of an issue. It'll probably reveal, 95% of a problem. All right, let's keep going. By the time we'd been together for about a year, everything felt like it was moving in the right direction. Bruce ran a company with his dad, and from what he shared, it was a lot of work. But things were good between us, and when he suggested I move up north to another state where his second family home is, now that the COVID restrictions were ending and his work was getting busier, I thought it was the next step for us. I moved. I secured a remote job and kept asking him if I could join him on business trips, which was something we'd been talking about doing since he got to travel to plenty of interesting and cool places. But there was always an excuse for why I couldn't go. Oh dear. Still, we were talking daily, and I kept hoping things would get better. So you've been together for about a year, and he's done a lot of, at this stage, I think it's safe to call it future faking of holidays you could do together. And yet he's coming up with these excuses as to why you couldn't go. Something tells me that when the rubber hit the road, this man was not really able to deliver on what he suggested. But then, oh dear, a shift. Things began to change. We started fighting a lot, and I'm not proud of it, but I was struggling. I had anxiety, panic attacks, and felt so depressed. After Googling, I discovered EMDR therapy. I briefly mentioned to Bruce that I had found a therapist back in my home state and mentioned EMDR. And he pushed me to go, saying that if I didn't, he couldn't do this anymore. Can I take a moment here to say maybe I need to get a bit of curiosity in like with these arguments and how they went down, but I find it very interesting that Matilda, you're the one who's actively looking for therapy. And you've mentioned being like, yeah, I found something really good. And he feels the need to say, if you don't do this, I don't know if I can be with you. I don't know if I can do this anymore. I mean, look, when I think of the anatomy of an argument, right? And also when there's a partner who's struggling with therapy, their mental health, whatever, normally it's, okay, normally what happens in a dysfunctional relationship is the struggling partner might actually refer to the dysregulated partner to go to therapy, whether it be for an addiction, an attachment issue, whatever it wants to be, mental health issue, personality disorder. And there'll be a lot of resistance and pushback from that dysregulated person, right? And usually you will find that you're begging and pleading and asking them to go to therapy. And you might even go to therapy yourself to try and find out if you're the problem, right? I find it particularly odd that Matilda, you're the one who's, doing all the research, trying to take ownership of your side of the street, but he's almost not even reflecting, being like, yeah, actually, maybe I should go too. Do you want to do couples counseling as well too? It's almost like he's making it out like it's your entire issue. And in some cases, I get it because there can be, in other cases, one partner might be really battling depression, an attachment issue, whatever it may be, and maybe they're the one that does need the support and the targeted treatment. But if I had a partner who was struggling, would I say to them, as they've just found EMDR, please do this, otherwise I don't think I can do this any longer. I mean, that's what I'm reading from this. I don't know if that was exactly what was said, but it just makes me think, I just feel a little bit of condescension from Bruce for mental health related challenges, as if to say it's all on Matilda to work on this. So, not great vibes. He also promised that once I finished therapy, he would move back down and move in with me. Okay, so very conditional thing here. So I went. I was diagnosed with PTSD from my childhood, but I really wanted to do the work to get better. He funded the entire move back and took care of everything for me. Okay, wow. That's that's a lot. You know, there's a lot of hot and cold stuff going on with this. There's, a lot of material support with the money, but at the same time, a bit of condescension for your mental and emotional well-being, where it's like, you need to do this, otherwise I'm not committing. We're not going to move in together. Like I feel like it's a little bit ultimatum-y conditional. And of course, sometimes, in relationships where they escalate, things will get into ultimatum land. I understand that. But something about this just feels a little bit manipulative and not great. So, yeah. Matilda writes, I finished my EMDR therapy and, oh, sorry, and it helped me so much. But as I was working through my healing, I started noticing things with Bruce in our relationship that I hadn't seen before. Bruce would visit me in my home state, but every time I brought up moving in together, there was always an excuse for why he couldn't. He even started avoiding FaceTiming calls, which would hurt, and I noticed my anxiety coming back, but I didn't understand why. Ah, ha, 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 ha. Could it be that your body knew what the problem was this entire time? It's one thing to have a history of trauma and to also be carrying a lot of that baggage, But I think it's an entirely different thing when your body starts to react to the poor behavior from someone else. So that's unfortunately something that well, I don't want to say you can't control it because you can always leave partners that make you dysregulated, but that in and of itself is not great advice because we know how hard it is to step away from someone we love, even if they're being dysfunctional, right? But yeah, interesting. Then came Christmas. I'd surprised Bruce with plane tickets to visit my family overseas, and he was excited. But just days before we were set to leave, we had a huge fight, and he didn't show up at the airport. He claimed his dad was sick, and I went to see my family overseas, upset, but I couldn't cancel. When I came back, Bruce was at the apartment saying his dad was better, and we could spend New Year's together. Before I could ask any more, he told me he couldn't move in because of his dad's health. He asked me to move back instead. What the fuck? Okay, there's a lot I want to say to this. One, I feel like he's using his dad as an excuse, and even if his dad is genuinely sick, I feel like he's not involving you in a lot of this decision making. Two, I find it interesting how he dictates the terms. He's financing your move, he's telling you if you can spend New Year's together. This is a man who's very controlling of the dynamic. And then on top of that, too, he's also dictating the terms of you moving back in. It's like now because of his dad's health, you have to move back. It's like, why? Why can't we negotiate this and talk about it? Like, there's a complete absence of negotiation. Now, since I had lost my dad before we met and can tell he was afraid of losing his own, I had agreed. He had to go back to work, so I packed up the apartment and drove 13 hours to be with him. We secured an apartment together, and once again, he promised he'd move in and funded the move. Again, very hot and cold sort of behavior here. Bit of financial manipulation, I feel. I made sure it was just 7 minutes from his dad's place to stay close by. But when I arrived, things felt different. He hardly came over, always saying his dad's health was getting worse, but wouldn't let me visit. I wonder if the dad's health is truly that bad and he's actually just exaggerating things. When we ended up at the gym at the same time, he ignored me completely, something he had never done before. I suggested we throw a housewarming party and that he could invite his friends, but he snapped at me saying, "Why are you trying to see my friends? You need your own friends. Stop leeching off me to be social." Wow. Wow. Okay, wow. It's not every day that I hear someone saying that. That's disgusting. I have to say, we have now crossed the line of attachment issues into personality stuff. There's, whilst severely dismissive avoidant leaning people, whether that be the full DAs or the dismissive leaning FAs, can have a lot of that, how do I put it? They can have that, I suppose, guardedness over resources and scarcity. There is something here about the way he said that, where it's like, you know, oh, why are you trying to see my friends? You need your own friends, as if to say, like, we can't share, as if you're somehow trying to steal his friends. It's like, I don't think you are. I think you're just being generous, being like, hey, let's try and make this work together. I mean, according to you, Matilda, the issue was you just didn't feel like he was as connected with you after after that Christmas, and you're trying to make things work with him and you were like, well, why don't we do a housewarming? You weren't saying, what, like, can I just hang out more with your friends? Or, hanging out with his friends without permission or even talking about it. It just seems like such an overreaction in response to you trying to rebuild the connection with him. But his overreaction is laced with a lot of anger and venom. And I feel like yes, there's enmeshed vibes in here as well, too. I suspect he is enmeshed with his family. But there's a bit of a rage here, which makes me feel like I'm getting narky vibes. Anyways, Matilda wrote, I was embarrassed. Yeah, I feel very sorry for you. It would have been fun to do this housewarming with his friends, and they could have invited plus one so I could get to know people, since I didn't know anyone there. I attributed all of this to his stress with his dad's health and let it go. Oh, no, 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 no. No, 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 no. The dad's health, I think, is probably the tip of the iceberg. But the real bulk of the iceberg is the fact that Bruce doesn't want to connect with you in the same way that he did before because things are getting more real and intimate and he doesn't like it. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that dad's health probably hasn't changed all too much. He's just looking for excuses not to be as engaged as he was before. This is really shitty behavior from his side. I am very sorry for you, Matilda. This is bullshit. And I can imagine a bit re-traumatizing if you've had individuals who've been like this before. Then came my birthday. Oh dear, don't tell me it gets worse. I didn't hear from him all morning, so I called him. He answered, sounding annoyed. I asked him how his morning was, and he said, busy, working. Wow, Jesus. Yeah, I've got to say, it's DAs and even dismissively FAs, they can be a bit spicy during these moments when they're, starting to freeze, but they're not usually this mean. Like sometimes they can be, but it's almost a carelessness. But this is sounding just really nasty sort of stuff. I waited for him to acknowledge it was my birthday, but there was nothing. I asked, do you even know what day it is? And Bruce responded with Tuesday. I half yelled and half cried, saying, it's my birthday. He laughed at me and said he knew, but he just wanted to see how I'd react. Oh no. No, 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 no. I'm sorry. We are now getting into narky, narky, narc land. This is just not okay sort of shit at all. Definitely feeling dismissive, avoidant vibes, but I think there's definitely a narcissistic overlay with this. I didn't see him all that day. He was quote unquote too busy with work. Later, he called and asked what I did for myself. I told him I stayed home and cried. He scoffed and asked why I didn't take myself out to dinner. Oh my God, this guy's a see you next Tuesday. I broke down and told him I felt forgotten. To this, he DoorDashed me a McFlurry from the Dairy Queen. Oh my God. Matilda, I've got to be honest, you might be one of the first people where I'm actually going to be like, I think you dated more than a dismissive avoidant. Like, there have been a few cases where I'm like, this is definitely screaming personality flavors. You're definitely right up there with this. This was nothing like the prior birthdays. Before he would go all out to celebrate. Now I was feeling really hurt by his behavior. Can I just say, door dashing you a McFlurry, disgusting. Like, how do you even know? Like, how would he even know what you like? That's just a bit of a tokenistic gesture. Again, a lot of that material, like, I'm just going to put some money into it. Like, I'm just going to throw you some money as if, like, that puts a band-aid on things. Fucking hell. What a see you next Tuesday of a human being. Anyways, I apologize if I'm getting a little bit heated with this, but I just think gross, disgusting behavior. I started asking him for more time together, sharing how my anxiety and depression were starting to come back. He told me that my therapy clearly hadn't worked and suggested I consider medication, saying he couldn't deal with me like this anymore. Again, with the very disparaging remarks. I suppose this confirms my hunch from what I was saying earlier, which is I feel like he isn't in it to support, your vulnerabilities. He's just seeing you and your emotions as a problem rather than something to be worked on. So, not okay. After some time, I found a doctor who prescribed me antidepressants. The first month, I felt like a zombie, but eventually I noticed the medication helping. Still, something felt off. I kept asking him things like, am I a secret? He'd call me paranoid and tell me to stop. I am very sorry, but I'm going to just say this right now. This is absolutely sounding like narky narc narc behavior. Like, the whole like, are you paranoid? Encouraging you to get a medication when you don't like when in my experience, I'd be like, I don't think the medication's the problem. I'd be pointing to the partner. I'd be pointing to Bruce and being like, this is this is the secret to your anxiety and depression. But anyways, far out. I'm really sorry for you, Matilda. This is fucked. Anyways, I then found out the truth. After I'd gone back to my home state for therapy, I learned that Bruce had told his friends and family that we'd broken up. What the? Sorry, what? It's one thing for an avoidant to a severe avoidant to break up with you directly via text or to your face or ghost you. But for him to tell his friends and family without involving you, this is just adding that layer of like controlling the narrative, not involving you, but taking it like to an 11 out of 10 and just being so nasty about it. I'm going to say this. If this guy is not a narcissist, I'm going to have to go back to psychology school and learn more about diagnoses because he sounds like it. Like this is just, and I can say this because even though I can't obviously diagnose him and say, you are a narcissist, Bruce, but there's enough stuff here that's so egregious and sneaky and subtle that's different from what I've normally seen in these presenting cases. And I'm sure regular listeners might even be listening to this being like, there's something very off about this case compared to the regular ones. It's true that the FAs can be a little bit like a volcano about to erupt, but with this, there's a certain just nastiness that has persisted throughout this entire experience. It's just unlike any of the other cases I've read out but thus far. Anyways, well, he had been my absolute rock during my therapy process, supporting me through everything, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My gut feeling had always been there, but it disappeared when he finally admitted the truth. He told me he lied about our relationship status because his dad didn't like me. Oh my God. I bet that's an excuse. Then he listed all the reasons why his dad didn't like me and assured me that he never, quote unquote, acted single. I was horrified. I couldn't believe he had asked me to move back, knowing what he'd done behind my back. This guy is just got values that are baking in hell. Like, man, this dude, this man, Jesus Christ, this is so fucked. Even though we still shared a lease, I packed up the apartment within 5 days, had movers come in and left for my home state. When I told him I was leaving, he was so apologetic. He almost cried, which I'd never seen before. He said he was sorry, that it was a trauma response, and he was going to therapy to get help. He told me he didn't want to lose me, that I was the best thing that ever happened to him, and that I was the most supportive person in his life. But I still left. Good on you. We did long distance for about 10 months, and he told me during that time he was in therapy, he was doing EMDR too. I supported him because I knew how hard the process was. We talked daily, and we talked about getting back together, getting engaged, having kids, everything. I was concerned with my fertility because doctors suspected endometriosis, which I swear to God, just want to say this as, someone who works with a lot of clients with autoimmune issues. Endometriosis, I don't know how to pronounce that, but I've heard a lot of clients tell me they've had it. I reckon is such the autoimmune problem of these relationship dynamics. So just putting it out there, if you have any autoimmune flare-ups, blame your relationships and the stress you're probably carrying. Anyways, I know there's more to it than that, and it's not always that. But anyways, autoimmune problems and relational stress tend to go hand in hand like koalas and trees. Anyways, and he said he wanted to show me how committed he was to our future. So, Bruce and I went to the fertility doctor and had testing done together. We discussed treatment options. He was being more open with his feelings and sharing things with me. I thought he'd changed, and I was proud of him. No, he hasn't changed. The distance is what probably elicited that because there was a space between the two of you. I'm now starting to get a little bit of FA vibes, but definitely strong narky narc vibes. By December, after 10 months, we had a plan and agreed upon a boundary. He had finished his therapy and was going to move in. We'd even picked out a couples therapist for when he moved in, and we knew the next steps with the fertility doctor. Everything was coming together. I forgave him for what happened before. I believed in him, and I was so happy, but then Christmas came. I just want to say, this is like a nightmare in the making. What's really terrifying to me about this is the fact that it seems like everything's just gotten magically better after you walked out from him, after he went around, behind your back to tell the friends and family that it's over, and then to give you that piss poor excuse of, well, my dad doesn't like you. It's like, well, then why the fuck did you go back to Matilda after this, bro? Bruce, like, where the fuck is your head at? Like, seriously. And I think the way he's gone about this is so manipulative and just so not okay. Anyways, let's talk about Christmas. Matilda writes that I had gone all out. I prepped his favorite foods, made everything festive, and tried to make it a fresh start for us. I was hopeful, excited. He promised he'd be there, and I believed him. But as the hours went on, I could feel that something was wrong. Oh yeah, that feeling, by the way, is just the worst, isn't it? I reached out to ask where he was, and he told me it was a surprise. We talked on and off throughout the day while he was driving, but I started to notice something odd. I would hear the truck turn off randomly, and then he'd suddenly have to go. I had a really bad feeling, but I told myself it was just nerves. More time had passed, and I reached out again. He eventually stopped responding. Finally, by 9:30 p.m., he called me. He said he wasn't coming. He told me that his dad didn't hate women, just me, and that being with me would cost him his future in the family business. Wow. 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 Oh, oh man, I'm feeling that. Oh my God. The disgusting level of that comment. Just, oh man, I just need to sit with that for a moment. That's beyond fucked. I almost want Amy to be here to just listen to this shit. Maybe I need to segment this section and be like, Amy, I need you to listen to this atrocity. I'm sure Megan and Tawny would listen to this too, and even Cody would be like, what the fuck is this shit? But far out. Oh man, that's disgusting. Wow. Wow. So again, instead of actually owning his own shit, he's using the dad as, it's almost like, here's the thing is, there's no evidence of triangulation. There's no evidence to show that the dad doesn't like Matilda. That's really fucked up. That's really, really bad. Oh man. Anyways, Matilda adds, Bruce had said he was a workaholic, a commitment phobe, and he'd been lying to himself. He ended the call saying, and that was your boundary, that he would be here by Christmas to moved in. And that was your boundary. So, okay. Okay, so basically, from what I'm reading from this was there must have been a boundary between Matilda and Bruce to have Bruce move in by Christmas to, establish the relationship. And so now he's using Matilda's boundary against her, being like, well, you said the boundary was that I move in by Christmas, so I haven't. I'm respecting your boundary. This man, this man. Somebody find me this man so I can pin him on all the Facebook pages that say, watch out, this is a felon in disguise. I have never felt so betrayed and heartbroken in my life. That boundary, well, yeah, I brought it up, was never something we'd agreed on together and had talked, and we'd also talked about this multiple times to make sure we're on the same page. The consequence, that actually, sorry, pause. So if that wasn't truly a boundary, it sounds to me more like that was just merely a bit of an invitation. So he's weaponizing that invitation saying, oh, well, that was your boundary. It's like, but you weren't. Like, it just sounds to me like you were just chatting about plans. Man, this guy is awful. Like, truly the worst. And I've read a lot of these cases. Oh, man. Anyways, the consequences of Bruce not moving in was us not moving forward in our relationship, and I had to end up spending Christmas alone. Can I just say, you've described how you went to so much effort to set the Christmas experience up to be festive, and you felt hopeful. I could only imagine just the sheer amount of betrayal, hurt, if you had to look at all of this stuff. Sorry, that was Olivia Rodrigo. Um, I could only imagine just how brutal and painful it would be to see like the entire festive season, this decorated space where you're alone, probably like bawling your eyes out and just so heartbroken by this. I've been in similar situations before. It's just the worst because you put in all this effort and it takes you to like an all new rock bottom. Matilda, I am truly sorry that you've gone through this because this is disgusting behavior. I am so, so sorry that he's done this to you. I want to make it clear too, I'm sure that there were plenty of great moments in this relationship because I don't want to make it out like it's always the bad ones. There was actually a really good comment the other day where someone had said, all the fearful avoidance that get read out seem like dramatic characters that I've never met in my life. And it's like, well, if you think about it, it makes sense because most of the people that are writing these letters don't actually spell out the good times. It's usually the emotionally painful moments that get highlighted throughout these readings. So, we're only looking at probably 20, maybe even 5% of what goes on in these dynamics. The 80 to 95% is the stuff that doesn't really get glossed out that much because people are intuitively responding to those moments where they were like, something went wrong. And usually those things that went wrong were inconsequential in a regular relationship, anyways. So, yeah. Man, I'm feeling it. Oh, my heart's hurting on behalf of Matilda. Far out. Anyways, it's been 2.5 months now since then, and he's gone full ghost mode when I reached out asking for some kind of closure. The only time Bruce responded via text was to blame me for the breakup, saying his reasons are valid and that I've quote unquote held those reasons against him for years. But the thing is that according to him, it was his dad who was responsible for this. This guy has so much shame. I'm gonna say it. He's more than a DA or an FA. I can't really, I feel like I want to say dismissive leaning FA at a stretch, dismissive avoidant maybe, but definitely I reckon he's got some personality issues, 1 billion percent. Like, I bet you anything, a clinical psychologist or psychiatrist would probably check this out and be like, yeah, there's something very twisted about this person. Hearing this from Bruce, it was like a slap in the face. And literally, a few days before Christmas, he was telling me that I was the most supportive person in his life and how excited he was to start out our new future together. I took your online course, which helped a ton, thank you, and took the step of removing him from my social media when I felt ready. But he still watches my stories, and I don't understand why. Part of me feels sorry for him and at the thought that he may never change and that it stems from his childhood. But then part of me gets angry because I also had childhood trauma and would never treat anyone this way. Matilda, thank you very much. The course that Matilda's referring to is my breakup recovery course that I did at the end of last year, and I'm looking to revamp that soon. But I want to round out here and just say, Matilda, I am so, so sorry that you have gone through this. This is beyond fucked. And just to round out really quickly, when you say I don't understand why he watches my stories, he still is emotionally linked to you. He still, I think, has degrees of fondness and positive regard for you. But man, his shame, through the roof, just through the roof. Oh, God, what a vile human being. I know there's positive sides to him too, but just, oh, yuck. All right, I'm going to end it here. Matilda, thank you for your letter submission, and I look forward to coming back again soon.